When you think about war at sea, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably these massive fleets, right? Clashing in a huge battle, cannons blasting, ships sinking into the depths. Well, for more than 100 years, that's pretty much been the main picture. But today, we're going to dig into the work of a strategist who argued that this whole sledgehammer approach is often just wrong. We're talking about Julian Corbett, and trust me, his ideas might completely change how you see naval warfare.
And with these words, Corbett basically threw down the gauntlet. You see, he was looking at a military world that was totally obsessed with Napoleon's idea of total war, of total victory. They had this belief that there was only one way to fight: find the enemy's main army or fleet and just annihilate it. Corbett had a name for this. He called it bludgeon play, and he was about to prove there were much, much smarter ways to win.
So, here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll tackle the myth of total war. Then, we'll get into why war is really just politics. We'll explore his huge distinction between limited and unlimited war, and then see the unique freedom you get from sea power. After that, we'll look at some of the clever strategies this opens up. And finally, we'll boil it all down to his most important principles.
All right, first things first, the myth of total war. This is the big idea that Corbett had to completely dismantle before he could build up his own theories. It's this super common, but as he saw it, deeply flawed idea that the only real goal in a war is to utterly crush the other side's military.
Yeah, this is the image of war we all got from Napoleon. The entire nation is mobilized, every single resource is thrown at the enemy army until it's just gone. And look, it's dramatic, it's decisive, but according to Corbett, it was a terrible, terrible model to just blindly apply to naval strategy. Why? Because it completely ignores the whole reason wars are even fought in the first place.
And that leads us right to Corbett's foundational concept. Now, he borrowed this from the legendary Prussian theorist Karl von Clausewitz. The idea is simple, but it is absolutely revolutionary. War isn't just mindless violence. It's a tool. It's something you use to achieve a political goal.
To really get this, we have to understand a little thought experiment that Clausewitz came up with. He called it absolute war. So just imagine a war fought in a total vacuum, with no politics, no friction, nothing. It's just this pure, logical escalation where both sides use every ounce of their strength until one of them is completely wiped out. Now, it's a useful theory for understanding the forces at play, but it's not how things work in the real world.
And this really highlights the core difference, right? The theory of absolute war is neat and tidy, but reality is messy. Real wars are driven by political goals. A country doesn't fight just for the sake of fighting. It fights to get something. And because those goals are always different, the intensity and the scope of the war are going to be different too.
This right here, this is the quote that changes everything. If war is just a tool of politics, then the military objective, sinking a fleet or winning a battle, is never the real objective. The real objective is always the political one. Military action is just how you get there. And once you really understand that, the whole logic of strategy starts to shift.
So that brings us to what is probably Corbett's single most important contribution: the difference between an unlimited war and a limited war. And this isn't just some academic classification. It's a powerful tool that unlocks a whole new universe of strategic thinking, especially if you're the smaller power in a fight.
Which, brings us to this critical question. If war is just about throwing your full weight against the enemy, then the bigger guy should always win, right? David would never be Goliath. So how do the underdogs pull it off? Well, Corbett's got the answer.
They win by fighting for a limited object. Instead of trying to conquer the entire enemy nation, which is an unlimited goal, you fight for something smaller, something specific, something you can actually achieve. Maybe it's a distant colony, maybe it's an island, or a particular piece of territory. The goal isn't to destroy your enemy. It's to make the cost of them continuing the fight higher than the value of what they're trying to hold on to.
The Russo-Japanese War is the perfect case study. You have tiny Japan going to war with the absolutely colossal Russian Empire. On paper, it looks like madness. But Japan wasn't trying to conquer Russia. No, their limited objective was to control Korea and Manchuria. So they used their navy to isolate that specific territory, cutting it off from Russia. After losing battle after battle, the Tsar finally realized that holding on to this faraway piece of land just wasn't worth the staggering cost in men and money. And so Russia quit. Japan won, not by destroying Russia, but by making the war too painful for them to continue.
Okay, so this whole concept of limited war gets even more powerful for a maritime nation. And this is where Corbett ties everything back to the sea, arguing that naval power gives a country a special kind of strategic freedom, a word he loved to use: liberty.
So here's the kicker. Corbett argued that this kind of limited war is really only a sustainable strategy for an island power like his home country of Britain or like Japan. Why? Well, think about it. If you share a land border with a much stronger enemy, they can always just ignore your little limited objective and invade your homeland, instantly escalating it to an unlimited war. But if you're an island, the sea is your moat.
Corbett absolutely loved this quote from Francis Bacon because it just nails the idea perfectly. If you control the sea, you control the terms of the fight. You can choose to fight a small, limited war for one little thing, or you can escalate if you need to. You have options. Your land-based enemy? They're often stuck in a much tougher position. Here's how it works in practice. It's kind of like a three-step process. First, your navy makes your own island an untouchable fortress. The enemy simply can't invade you. Second, you use that same navy to go to your limited objective and cut it off from the enemy's mainland, just like Japan did. And third, because they can't invade you, they can't escalate. They're forced to fight on your terms for the limited thing you chose. You have strategic liberty, they don't.
Okay, so if the goal isn't always to sail out and smash the enemy's main fleet in one giant battle, what do you do? This is where Corbett's thinking gets really practical. He offers a whole toolkit of strategies that are way more nuanced than just simple bludgeoning play.
Let's just take the blockade, for example. A closed blockade means you basically park your fleet right outside the enemy's harbor and you don't let them leave. It's really tough on your ships and your crews, but it's absolutely essential if your political goal is to, say, prevent an invasion at all costs. But then there's the open blockade. This is different. You pull your fleet back, you leave the door open a crack, trying to tempt the enemy to come out into the open sea where you can finally destroy them. The choice between them? It depends entirely on your ultimate political goal.
And now for one of Corbett's most brilliant concepts, the fleet in being. Now, this isn't just a fleet that exists, it's a fleet that is active. So imagine you're outnumbered. Instead of hiding in port or sailing out to get annihilated, your fleet stays at sea, kind of shadowing the enemy, remaining a constant menacing threat. The enemy can't ignore you. They can't split up their forces to attack your trade or transport their army because your fleet in being is always there, waiting to pounce on any mistake. It paralyzes them without firing a single shot.
And this quote from Admiral Kempenfelt just sums it up perfectly. A fleet in being doesn't have to win a battle to be effective. Its job is to keep him at bay, to make every single move the enemy even thinks about a massive risk. It commands their attention, it limits their actions. It's just a masterful defensive strategy that can get huge results with a weaker force.
All right, so after going through all these incredible ideas, let's bring it all home and summarize the key takeaways from the naval genius of Julian Corbett. Here it is, the Corbett playbook, all boiled down. Number 1, always remember that war serves politics. Your military goals have to serve your political ones. 2, know if you're fighting a limited or an unlimited war. That choice defines your entire strategy. 3, command of the sea isn't an end in itself. It's a way to get strategic liberty and control. 4, sometimes the most important target isn't the enemy warships, but the vulnerable ships carrying their army. And finally, number 5, never underestimate the power of an active defense, like a fleet in being, to neutralize a stronger enemy.
You know, Corbett wrote all of this over 100 years ago. It was a world of battleships and coal, which leaves us with a really fascinating question for today. In our modern world of satellites and cyber attacks and long-range drones, do his principles still apply? Is command of the sea and the liberty it gives you still the game-changing ultimate strategic advantage it once was? That's definitely something to think about.